Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for the interruption, but what I'm not sorry about is starting day 3 of FinCom 2022. Now, this is an initiative, another summit by CXO Global Forum, which is a knowledge-sharing platform for all C-levels across the globe. We take massive pride in contributing to the knowledge economy. And today as well, day 3, first segment of the FinCom Summit 2022, and we've got a powerhouse panel with us. We've got, our esteemed panelists who are the movers and shakers, let's say, of investment in Pakistan. The topic that we'll be opening with is Fintech and e-commerce. What is the attraction for investors? Let me start by introducing our panelists. We've got Mr. Yusuf Hussain joining us from HPL, Mr. Roger Dawood Bayat, who's an angel investor, Faisal Aftab from Zyan Capital, and Misbah Naqvi from I2I Ventures. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what's very important is that all eyes have been on Pakistan lately in terms of global investments coming in. Now, the average deal size 5 times to $5.9 million in the first 9 months of the Jan to December year of 2021, compared to $1.2 million the last year. Now, we've seen a lot of prominent startups like Airlift and Bazaar fetching close to $100 million collectively. We've also seen fintech players like KistPay, Tag, and Uran who've gotten close to $25 million collectively. So what's the attraction here? What's pulling all the investments towards Pakistan? Let's start our conversation with Mr. Faisal Aftab. Faisal, I'm going to get straight to the point. By the way, just congratulations are in order. Naya pay. So I'm very glad. But what we want to know, the audience in particular, why is it that a lot of investors are getting attracted towards fintech and e-commerce in Pakistan?
Sure. First of all, thank you for NAPE. Congratulations on NAPE, and thank you for having me on the forum. I always zoom out and I go more along the lines of this is more geopolitical fintech than anything else. It's more of the disruption of the analog SWIFT system that currently exists in the world banking system. So you have to look at, I would even link what's happening in Russia and Ukraine to some of this. It's energy pricing and transit routes, which effectively determines what currencies are going to be priced in trade, and then bonds from there on. But effectively, the monetary system is debt-based. So every time there's a contraction, which we had in March 2020, and then stimulus was sent in, you need to expand credit and debt. And Pakistan, among the next 11, these are the countries where credit and debt is going to be expanded, which we saw play out in 2008, where basically the BRICS credit was expanded, and 1998, where you saw the Eurozone effectively come online as a union. From Pakistan's perspective, the reason why fintech is so important is because we're an undocumented economy. And a lot of the e-commerce platforms that we're also going to talk about later and all the other platforms, you have to think of them as an integrated network that are capturing data and economic activity. And then fintech is the element that's going to come and start to offer lending, both at a consumer level, at a working capital level for retailers and companies. And so this is a whole new conduit of how to think about Pakistan. I think the next 10 years are going to be very different. And consequently, all the venture capitalists, their job is primarily to identify the long-term changes. And so they're moving in because they see a huge opportunity. I'll let Misbah and other people tell you about the general stats in terms of why it's so attractive in terms of people unbanked and all that stuff. But I thought I'd give this perspective.
Thank you, Faisal. Moving on, Misbah, is your opinion any different from Faisal's?
No, I agree with a lot of what Faisal's saying, and I think I'll maybe come one level below his zoom out, like he was suggesting as well. I think for us, in a market like Pakistan, where we throw around the statistics all the time, 220 million population, percentage of people have access to broadband, how many users are online, and then of course how much of our population is Gen Z and adopting technology really fast. All that is there, but what's important there is to understand the opportunity that represents, because so much has not been delivered as yet in either at all or in an efficient way. So I think what fintech and e-commerce and also the third part of that triangle really is logistics. And from a fintech perspective, it's payments, but it's beyond that, broader than that as well. What that really is, what we see happening in markets like Pakistan right now is that, along with the opening up of some of these regulations, the easing up of some of these regulated areas, what's also happening is that adoption of technology is happening, and people are also recognizing that you can actually leapfrog some of the older systems and go from analog to digital, to Faisal's point, really fast, but also skip through some of the cycle that other markets have seen and go digital native really quickly. And the point over there is it becomes easier to access people. It becomes easier to give people a similar quality of service across the board when you're actually looking at digital solutions. I think in terms of Pakistan, the opportunity is pretty clear in both in access to goods and services, but also from a fintech perspective, access to finance, which is very important. And we can get into a little bit more of the factors around that in our conversation. But I think also important to highlight that, that in last year, the highest number of deals that were done in the Pakistan startup space were in the fintech space. And the highest amount that was raised by startups were by e-commerce startups. Of course, you mentioned Airlift and Bazaar, Anza, there are a couple of the ones that stand out because the rounds were large. But the important aspect is that these are driving activity in the startup space in Pakistan. And we're starting to see a bit of a domino effect there, where there's more activity happening in areas which are already hot, because people can see that there's money coming towards it, there's interest from investors, but also it starts with the opportunity really that we have in terms of being able to give people access to financial services, but also being able to engage with technology in a way that helps improve lives.
Right. Misbah, we lost you there for a couple of seconds. So I'd urge you to maybe just change your connection. And moving on, Mr. Yusuf Hussain, your take on the question.
Well, I think that Faisal and Misbah have articulately described the big picture. And I would support their views. I don't think necessarily I would like to add to that, but if you want, I can give you from a bank's perspective why these areas are particularly important to us, if that's okay.
Right. So I think what the audience would also be interested in hearing is the perspective of, a commercial bank stepping into the fintech space. I know more and more banks are encouraged to do so. So if you could have your viewpoint on that.
Yes. So as a bank, and I'm here to represent in particular HPL VC fund. I'm not here to represent the bank. But from the perspective of the HPL VC fund, I think there are, I don't even want to use the word tremendous. I think there are critical synergies between banks and fintechs in general. I think going forward, looking 4 or 5 years down the line, maybe a lot of the customer facing data and the distribution channels will be fintech companies or e-commerce companies and all kinds of different verticals. But then again, when it comes to lending and other financial services, to have that whole infrastructure of compliance and risk management through banks is essential as well. So insofar as HPL VC fund is concerned, like I think Faisal articulately said, that there's a, digital financial inclusion is one of our primary goals. Learning is a primary goal because obviously the space is evolving. There are some very, I think, insightful, respected viewpoints which are clashing. We don't know how things are going to evolve. So learning is one of the main things. And by learning, I don't mean attending board meetings and learning. By learning, what I mean is learning by doing. So to give you an example, with Finja, which was a fintech we invested in. We then extended credit facility. Now we're looking at lending directly to the customers. We have a 50,000 strong Connect network in the country. Customers can return their loans through a Connect network. They can digitally onboard. They have a salary on demand card. We are giving them honest support on our ATM network. We are now introducing them Islamic banking. So now the bank and the startup are working together to the mutual benefit, bringing value addition beyond the money to the startup, which is good for ROI for them, for us. But also we are both learning how to work together, which I think augurs well for the future. And similarly, in the area of e-commerce, I'm going to use e-commerce a bit broadly. I'll call it non-financial digital platforms. So we have EdTech, we have health tech, tourism tech, whatever. So we invested in a health tech company, Healthwire. And now similarly, there are 5 or 6 different areas with their corporate wellness program, with lending to their hospitals and clinics that we are also exploring. So we both learn to a mutual benefit, and that's why we're excited about this.
Right. Thank you so much for the very pertinent points. Now, Roger, you're in America right now, and you have been viewing Pakistan from that bird's eye view over there as well. So why are all the investors looking at Pakistan so keenly, especially in terms of fintech?
First of all, thank you for including me in this wonderful panel. I know all the panelists very well, and it's lovely to connect with them. So basically, I completely endorse what Aftab, Misbah, and Yusuf have said. But one of the points that I really want to make is why they're focusing on Pakistan is primarily fear of missing out, the FMO factor. A lot of these VCs invested in Indonesia a few years ago and have made tremendous multiples on that. And they're looking for the next frontier. And I think Pakistan was very similar to what Indonesia is today, with a large population, untapped markets, and still a room for a lot of players to come in. And I think, apart from the local, look, I'll be honest with you, a lot of the international VCs have invested in Pakistan because they have a belief. And that belief is very strong. And I hope this continues for the next 5 to 10 years, because I think Pakistan has a lot of potential, which has been untapped for at this point in time. But the fact is that really, as founders are a little bit more savvy. They understand what international VCs are doing and local VCs at the same time. They're looking for, how they can sort of improve their, pitch decks and financials and so on and so forth to make it attractive. And most of these businesses are very attractive, let's be honest, right? And I think that's where it is. So, after Pakistan, it's most probably Africa as the next, emerging destination. But Pakistan is going to be on the map because it really encompasses the population, 220 million people spread over, a vast land with a lot of opportunities, which we're seeing right now. And I think that's where the local VCs are also, and family offices, which I talk to on a local family offices that I talk to on a regular basis. They're saying, bring us the next deal, because what's happening? Why are these people coming into our own backyard and investing and making multiples? So I think that ecosystem has really developed over the past 5-6 years, ever since I got into it in 2014. And, we've seen tremendous opportunity, and especially last year, thanks to COVID, we've seen a wonderful rise in investments. And I think that's really testimony to the VCs, local VCs, encouraging investments in the local startups, bringing on co-investors internationally. So there's a lot of accolade and sentiment should go towards them. And of course, we've had visits from global international VCs recently. We had Tedley Himmer of Antler, and everybody knows that a few of the Robin Butler of Sturgeon has come in, and some of them are actually making funds to dedicate to Pakistan and the MENA region, basically. So Pakistan is definitely coming on the periphery. Now, in the first 1 to 5 years, 6 years, where we've raised only little, I think they were looking at Pakistan to see really if there is an opportunity over here or not. That's why they just put in small amounts of money. But the big money comes in, when there is a proven deliverable, and data is very important, for fintechs especially, and that's what VCs look at, to see onboarding of customers, cost of acquisition, and so on and so forth. So I think that's really helped, Pakistan's, and of course, let's not forget the regulators. They've caught on. They've understood the IT sector. They've understood, what the possibilities are and what they could generate in revenue for the country. And, with this entire ecosystem robust right now with everybody, I don't see it, I don't see it failing for at least another 10 years. So, that's my take. As an angel investor, I come in early. And then subsequently, when the larger rounds come in, that's when, I bring in the VCs, family offices, institutions, to be part of that, initiative. And, alhamdulillah.
Exciting times for Pakistan. Indeed.
Sorry?
Like I said, exciting times for Pakistan.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the panelists over here have contributed tremendously to the growth of this ecosystem. Right. And that's why, I completely respect them for what they're doing. And I wish they continue for, many years to come, inshallah.
Inshallah. So moving on, Faisal, we've seen that the State Bank of Pakistan, the SECP, they've all relaxed, a lot of their regulations and to attract investment in technology-based solutions. They've allowed more Pakistanis to set up holding companies abroad and attract investment through, all these initiatives. So we do see that the government is trying to provide an enabling environment. What more needs to be done? What are some of your policy recommendations? Faisal, if you could please unmute yourself.
Sorry, I just realized I was on mute. To your point, I think the government has done a lot. They've actually been fairly friendly. I don't think this was the case 4 or 5 years ago, but I don't think it was their fault. A lot of credit goes to the early VCs that were in Pakistan that actually worked with some of the local lawyers and some of the influencers to really go and lobby the government and help them understand the issues. And they've unlocked massive amounts of capital. So, and I feel like what's going to play out based on this is it's going to be a benefit to our GDP growth because, again, I'll go back to the macro element of this. It's what the government, what is doing is the results and dividends are going to pay off in 2030, where you're going to see effectively the informal economy of Pakistan, a fair chunk of it, gradually get documented within tech platforms. So if we were to estimate, I'd say, the total collective market cap of all the ventures in Pakistan would be anywhere from $30 to $50 billion by 2030. And while that sounds like a big number, you keep in mind that's like a cryptocurrency, small one is worth like 100 billion, right? 50 billion. So mid cap ones. So it's not that difficult given that we're the 5th most populous country. In terms of what they could do more, I mean, actually, I think they've done quite a bit. So really at this point, it's be laissez-faire, let the ecosystem kind of thrive. I believe a couple of days ago, they announced that they're also making some more relaxations for startups. And these are all good points. The last one I will say that the government does need to focus on, and I do understand federal government is not in their control because of the provincial governments with the NFC award. But, taxing bandwidth is pretty contrary to this growth. I mean, you have to treat it like a utility. And you want to make data ubiquitous. So, putting 18% or 16% taxes on bandwidth when it's already costly in Pakistan, that may be a bit of an impediment for scaling of this ecosystem.
Right. Absolutely. Yes, Misbah, I was just coming to you. Do you have something to add?
Thanks, Anza. Yeah, I wanted to pick up on what Faisal was saying. I think absolutely in terms of pushing for digitization, one thing that I think we still need to maybe take a step back and the government could potentially do more in is actually incentivizing digitization rather than penalizing it. I think we have examples of other regional markets where governments have, actually encouraged people to move away from cash by either putting a tax on cash or subsidizing digital transactions. For us, I know there's a double-edged sword over here because on one hand, the government wants to increase the tax net and to increase digitization. More will come into the tax net. So that's actually a positive. It also becomes an impediment sometimes to small merchants because they don't want to come into the tax net. But that's something I feel will change over time and has to, right? Because we do need to expand the tax net for the country. But I think on the digitization scale, it's very important to focus on what are the drivers of something like digitization at a grassroots level, at a small merchant level, and removing cash from the system. Most of us, and we know this, even in larger cities, we actually pay a tax on paying with a digital channel, like a credit card or a debit card, and we don't get the cash discount, which is actually the opposite of how it should be. So I think that is one thing where there needs to be a little bit more of a focus on how do we actually push digitization more broadly, because the adoption of technology is happening. What we need to do is remove the impediments. To Faisal's point, look at broadband access as a utility. Take away tax on things like laptops and phones, and sort of think about how you can actually make it easier for people to move away from cash, because people often don't recognize how expensive cash actually ends up being.
Right. Misbah, I do respect the point of view, and thank you so much for enlightening us with it. However, Mr. Yusuf Hussain, maybe you have a differing point, or maybe you have something to add here, because one of the keen observations has been that, yes, the government needs to do much more in terms of encouraging digitalization, because here in the urban centers, we have our Finjas and Kinus and POS payments and digital wallets and all that. But, even if we do bring in the technology to the remote areas, let's talk about like South Waziristan or the north of Balochistan. What happens is that they're lacking basic infrastructure and facilities. How can we make those people financially inclusive and bring them towards the cashless economy where they don't even have basic facilities like the internet or even 3G for that matter?
Well, okay, so first of all, as you may know, there's a government entity called the Universal Service Fund, whose mandate it is, right? So, but even there, by the way, we have problems with quality, right? Quality of service in those areas,
right?
Sometimes due to security reasons. And so one thing is that if the internet reaches them, what we've seen is they can begin engaging. And I have a personal kind of example from this, which is digiskills.pk, 3 million trainings delivered to date, earning about $300 million plus a year, according to the Ignite CEO. And these people range from Khuzdar to Kotli, Balochistan, to Kotli Azad Kashmir, to wherever. So they can engage if the internet is there. Now, when we do not have internet access facilities, like I'm not sure about the status of South Waziristan today, but I do remember that in that case, the local government, the KPIT board, set up these IT centers in Peshawar, not in the non-merged districts, and they came in from there. And it was more of a hassle, but at least nearby there was some facility available where they could access the internet. And obviously, we would like everybody has said, internet as a commodity. I think one prime minister said it's like the air we breathe, and I completely agree with that. We should penalize it in terms of taxation, whether it is internet service or phones or laptops or whatever, as little as possible, because it's like a growing child. And if you cringe now on this protein and food, the child is not going to grow to the full height and healthy. So this has to be a long-term view. So I do hope it covers the country. There are some, Elon Musk's new satellite program. I mean, that may solve the problem as well. So, so either here or there, but internet has to be there. That's it.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Roger Bayat.
I was just about to say, I wish Elon Musk comes to Pakistan and puts Starlink up over here. It'll cover the entire country regardless of what happens. Just that, it's one of those features that you have to, wait and see. Even though they've come, his folks have come to Pakistan. And
absolutely, they went to met with
PTA and so on and so forth. But they have to put it in a formal sort of application, which I hope gets done from that perspective, because it's, it'll be fantastic for the country and for the areas that are, uncovered at the moment. To be honest with you, I completely believe 60% of our population lives in rural areas. That's a sizable chunk. The internet providers today obviously, need to sort of recognize that and perhaps start doing that. And I'm sure they have innovative ways to be able to do that, to cover those areas. But obviously, it's a time-bound process. One has to sort of look at it from province to province, and that's really what it is. But with the adoption of 4G, especially in penetration of 4G, mobiles being, I think it's now about 100 million 4G users in Pakistan today. Not all of them are in the urban centers, so there are a lot of them using it in the rural centers where they are getting some sort of coverage. But you're right. I mean, the idea is, as the panelists have said, a lot has to be done, and in order to cover that. And I think it will, growing at 8 to 10% a year. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the fact is that these penetrations are happening. As far as I completely agree with Misbah. I don't think it's too early to sort of tax, the entrepreneurs and the tech ecosystem right now. Let it develop. Let it get its foundation and its platform ready, and of course then go and start doing light taxes or whatever it is that could be. And it like Dr. Atar Rahman wrote a very detailed analysis of the tech and internet, of the tech industry in Pakistan. And like Faisal said, in $30 to $50 billion economy, or at least from that vertical in 2030, is definitely on the cards. But the government has to be supportive. Now they've set up this technology fund recently. I think Prime Minister Imran Khan has announced this. I'm not sure what the total amount is, but I think it's about 10 billion rupees or something or the other to support startups emanating from Pakistan in order to be able to do that. Now that's fantastic, right? I mean, that's something that's very positive. STZAs have are now they're going to be in all the centers, and everybody's supporting that because it has a 10-year tax-free holiday for incentives, and a lot of these international brands are coming in, Samsung and so on and so forth. So I think if they're going to accord, international companies, they should accord local companies and support the local infrastructure and the verticals, in order to make it grow. Once it grows, once it gets its footing, once it's out there, then they look at taxing them from that perspective. But right now, it's really too early, and it's going to stifle, and perhaps, like Faisal said, it's going to minimize the growth of this sector.
Right. Thank you very much, Roger. Now, moving on, ladies and gentlemen, we've seen like tech ecosystems in other emerging markets. The current crop of Pakistani startups is primarily, and apologies for being politically incorrect, but copycats of tried and tested models in other emerging markets. So while we talk about B2B wholesale markets like Bazaar and Tajir, Retailo, SMB accounting products like Credit Book, Easy Khata, or even e-commerce marketplaces like Daraz, digital banking like SadaPay, Tag, etc. The companies have localized these business models to Pakistan's regulatory environment and designed their products to sort of fit the local consumer behavior. And these tried and tested models have scaled rapidly in Pakistan, given the relatively untapped market for such products and the high number of users using MCOM, ECOM, eventually. So these numbers are impressive. But Faisal, I would like you to tell me, please, if the VCs are going to be more receptive towards more tried and tested models with regards to fintech and e-com in Pakistan.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all investors are generally, they like to invest in what they've seen scale in other comparable markets to Pakistan. So whether those are companies in Latin America and Brazil where the demographics are somewhat similar to Pakistan, or India or Southeast Asia. Ideally, they want to invest in those type of platforms. So I actually say this to founders. And we have to be honest, everybody has a core competency. I think some of the smartest people in the world live in South Asia in general, but at the same time, we're very good at mimicking. but not so good at innovation. A lot of that goes to the academic system and the cohesiveness as a larger group versus individuality. So I think taking that into account as an investor, I have to be honest on that. And so generally what I say to founders is, hey, look east and look west, see what's worked. What I will add in what you were effectively saying as well is that it has to be localized. So you can't just take an idea or an app from somewhere abroad and try to implement that in Pakistan. You have to change the user interface for the local audience. I personally don't think there's much of a correlation between our education rate and tech adoption, because I've seen this personally in terms of I designed a user interface at one time. If you design a friendly user interface, you will see adoption, right? And case in point is the demographics that are using WhatsApp or even TikTok in Pakistan. If you make it easy, make it friendly, it's going to be adopted. And that's I think that is where things are. I'm seeing, at least in companies that are scaling, they understand these nuances of the equation.
Right. Thank you, Faisal. Now, Misbah, we also know that I2I backed Uran. Now, this was out of the box, indigenous idea for Pakistan, building up on the regular VC funds that women were used to. And it was also the female-first finance platform to boost financial inclusion in Pakistan. Do you think VCs would be more receptive towards newer ideas, or like Faisal said, tried and tested?
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning Uran. We think Halima, Farwa, and the whole team is really great. What we liked about the way, and I'll take Uran as an example, Anza, because you mentioned it, but then we'll zoom out to the bigger question. What we liked about Uran is that they're starting with a product that is very common. Like you said, VC committee, people is very prevalent in Pakistan. So the behavior change was minimal. The behavior change was moving it from in-person to online. Rather than explain the whole concept of a committee to begin with. And what they've been doing over a year is that engaging with their customer, really building for the customer. To the Faisal's point, in not just the interface, but understanding what are Pakistani consumers doing, what do they want from this product, and building around those needs and demands, so that you can actually focus on delivering quality and excellence to the customer. What we liked about that is that going from there, that creates a very strong base in a market that's relatively untapped. Only less than 10% of Pakistani women even have access to a basic bank account. That's like, I think it's like 7% or so. So 93% of half the population is basically out there without any access to financial services. So what Uran is doing is starting with a product that's familiar, and then understanding the needs of the customer and building from there. So building other savings products, and eventually building others like buy now, pay later, and products that can help expand access to finance, both from a lending perspective, from a savings perspective, and other products. So what we like about this is that they're still going to become a neobank like some of the other neobanks that are starting out in Pakistan, but they're starting with a product that makes sense, that the customers want, and then they're building from there, building through the customer knowledge. I think one thing about like building organically versus mimicking is that there are other markets where this has worked. Hefa is an example of a company that's actually working similarly. Nubank in Brazil has been one that has now had an IPO, and so it's a great example of how solutions that are built for local markets can grow and become big, and then at some point potentially regional or international, but maybe even not in a market like Pakistan. I think what's important is not only to build for your market, but also look at the trajectory of where some of these other solutions have gone and amend and edit as needed. So I think what we're starting to see Pakistani founders do, which is really great and encouraging, is that they start with a model that may have worked elsewhere, the copycat, as you called it. They adapted to Pakistan, but they're also keeping an eye on how did those companies do? How did that similar company in India, which was 5 years ahead, do? Did they monetize? Did they not monetize? At what point did they monetize? What issue did they have when they got to a certain user base? Or in Indonesia, for example. So I think that's a trend that we're starting to see Pakistani founders look at other markets to learn about what happened after the model was set up, what happened after the company was launched. 2 saal baad kya hua, 3 saal baad kya hua, and seeing if they can get ahead of the curve right now. And that's where there's learning and innovation that's coming in, even though the business model itself may not be rocket science or purely innovative in itself.
Right. Thank you. Roger, I feel like you have something to add here. You seem quite enthusiastic. Please unmute yourself.
So I wouldn't call it copycat. I think it's just adoption of something that's already out there, and
inspired,
and they fine-tuned it to this market, and it takes a lot, right, from that perspective. Now, one of the best cases that I've seen is Kareem, right? Mudassir Sheikha, boy from North Nazimabad, goes abroad. At a time where VC culture is not really there. Goes and speaks to a few taxi drivers, Pakistani taxi drivers, wanted to do off their off day and so on and so forth. And that story is just wonderful, and how they built, along with his co-founders, Kareem. And then went and sold it for $3.6 billion, right? Which I thought, was a fantastic story. And that really kind of, you could say, influenced Pakistani entrepreneurs to go out and do the same thing, right? So from that perspective, I would say it's basically adopting some sort of ideas that are out there, and then bringing it over here, and then coding it, and then doing the necessary work that they do, and look where they've come, from that perspective. Having said that, I think innovation, like Aftab said, is a much needed sort of sense to be able to do things. And this will come in time, because a lot of people will start getting ideas, and they know if funding is available, they'll be able to sort of prove that model, and then go to the VCs and say, look, this is what I need funding for. And I think that they will be welcomed with open arms from that perspective. So it's like I said, it's always been time bound. We've got fantastic entrepreneurs out there, and they're coming out. And they're taking the risks to be able to not going into your steady regular jobs that you have in different sectors. And this is where the youth, and I bank on youth. I'll be very honest with you. I bank on the people that actually make the difference, and that's where I think that ultimately all of us look at that, and and support that, and then that's going to be huge in the future. So as long as that support system is there, we're going to get very, very, stellar founders, as well as innovative ideas coming from Pakistan, which can go global from that perspective. Yes, a lot of jurisdictions have a head start. We've just started, but our catch up is quite quickly. Is being quickly done, thanks to the support that all the players are doing for this ecosystem.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Yusuf Hussain. Now, we know that because of HBL's financial clout, the massive network, progressive leadership, we've seen that there have been a lot of groundbreaking investments, like, for example, Finja. That's not only serving the purpose of digital financial inclusion, but also in terms of, lending. They've scaled their portfolio. Now, what more would you be looking for, not just in terms of fintech, but any other aspiring startup founders? What would be your, how would they look into matchmaking with the HBL VC fund? So, if I could please request you to unmute yourself and sort of repeat the last couple of sentences.
I had to join the gang and, talk while muted. So one focus area is fintech, and whether it's payments or BNPL, down the line maybe crypto, we got to keep an eye on that. The second thing is that I think it was Stephen F. King who wrote Bank 4.0, that the future of banking is everywhere except at a bank, right? So you're in tourism, or tech, or health tech, wherever your mobile wallet is, you may just use that, and you may not worry about opening a bank account even down the line. That could happen. And so we look at investing, like I said, in health tech. We're looking at ed tech. We are very serious looking at agri tech. And down the line, maybe some travel tech. So that's an area. Personal financial services is another area of interest. And finally, what I call enterprise, which is any area which is critical to the function of the bank down the line. Could be anything. Could be, for example, customer experience app which looks at all your end-to-end customer experience, telecom networking, errors, delays across all digital channels, for example. Could be a company which is a marketplace for physical service provision, HMAC, air conditioning, whatever, to help manage the network. Could be, and I think that's one of the gaps that we should also be talking about, which is the supply, particularly of good tech, a good tech force. I mean, salaries in some cases have doubled over the last year. We have this, on the one hand, we have this VC funding coming in. On the other hand, which is, of course, something we are all, very happy about. Then we have our IT industry growing, which we should be very happy about as well. I mean, it crossed $2 billion. I think it was a growth year on year of 40%, something like that. So all these areas are sucking tech manpower. And then corporations, obviously, Engro or Telenor or HPL, they are there. So I think, a company, I think, which solved this problem, we try to do that with Digitals.pk with middle level skills like website design or WordPress or digital marketing or QuickBooks or what have you. But if we can do that for AI and a cloud infrastructure and cybersecurity, I mean, that would be solving, I think, a problem not only for a particular organization or bank, but for the whole industry. And not to mention freelancers. Freelancers is another sucking pause of tech talent. So we got to compete.
Yusuf, a question that I wanted to, I just wanted to ask Yusuf a question. So, when you invest, your ticket sizes obviously are typical of what range, if you just don't mind me asking?
I'm going to say typically, but we can go below, we can go ahead, depending on how compelling a deal is. And before I answer that, I'd like to say another thing, that yes, we look at models from abroad, but like they say, ideas are a dime a dozen. I mean, you can get on the internet and look at any model. It's the execution. It's a leadership. It's putting the team together. It's learning. And when, for example, sometimes people, say that 80% of founders have foreign degrees, or foreign educated. In our case, neither of them is, because what we were looking for is kind of the character and the rigor and the learning to do heavy lifting over 4 or 5 years, learn, we can say inductively rather than deductively, and suffer some cuts and bruises, and then establish traction, establish growth, and show that they understand the customer and their problem very well. But coming back to Roger's question, I would say the bullseye is between $1 to $1.5 million right now. And for compelling deals, it could go earlier or it could go bigger.
So typically I know Faisal and Misbah, they take leads on investments, in some of their portfolio companies. Now, would you sort of look at that as an opportunity to either take a lead or become a co-investor with a lead investor, for example? Just something that I just wanted to throw out there to everyone, basically. I'm sorry, Anza, I'm taking up your question and answer session, but I was just curious.
That's all right, because that's definitely part of my follow-up questions.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I'm glad we're thinking on the same line.
I wouldn't look at it as an opportunity. If you ask Faisal, I've been after him. I want him to lead. I trust his vigor. And so we are in communication. We are in communication with others as well.
Fantastic.
A couple of others. But yeah, the way I look at it is that the fundamental thing is there should be a good flow of energy with the founders and with the other directors. I mean, that's kind of the ground, the culture. How do you get along? Are you pumping each other up or not? And I think you've got to identify the founders and the co-investors who kind of share that, and you can kind of bounce energy, ideas off each other and grow. So yeah, definitely would love to invest with co-investors. Roger, you and I are talking, and I'd love to talk to Misbah as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's something that is, obviously you mentioned that it has to be compatible to the vertical that you're in, right? Yes. Do you look at, really compelling opportunities that could be outside of that vertical, or at least, perhaps a distance complement to it, for example? I don't know. I mean, you mentioned healthcare, you mentioned agri-tech, you mentioned, fintech, and those are the verticals that you're kind of in, right? So in the sense that you support that, right, from that perspective. But, would there be an opportunity to sort of go out of that sort of range, in the future, at least?
You see, on the one hand, I want to say that already these areas are quite broad and we want to cover all of them.
Sure.
But on the other hand, I would be, I think, delinquent in saying that because, things evolve so fast that if there is something that one hasn't thought about, it happens a lot and it comes out of left field and one says, wow, why not?
That's true. Okay, great.
Why not?
Sorry, Anza, back to you.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen. I am so encouraged by this discussion, and I believe we should do another show just on VC funding and matchmaking matter. We're definitely going to consider that. But moving on, and mind me for being a buzzkill and the devil's advocate, Faisal, but fundraising continues to be difficult for Pakistani startups. So we've talked about some of the rosy use here, but while raising a seed or Series A round in Pakistan has become much easier in the last couple of years, raising growth rounds in Pakistan still remains challenging for most startups. Global growth investors who typically have lower risk tolerance than early stage investors have not yet developed, and correct me if I'm wrong, the comfort with Pakistan as a market for investments. Would you like to comment on this, please?
Sure. Yeah. So we've seen this in every single market. It's an evolution process, right? So if you look at India, when it first started to really scale and money started coming in, you saw this huge pump in valuations, and pretty much anyone with any tech thing could get funded. And that usually happens. I mean, every boom comes right after a crisis. So India got it in the previous cycle. In Pakistan's case, we saw that last year. I mean, we went parabolic. Literally, the money came in a very vertical way, right? And then you have basically a reassessment. Good founders start running out. There's only a finite number of resources that know how to scale. And those have come from existing layer one platforms or wave one, like Careem, Foodpanda, Daraz. I mean, people that have worked in these companies know how to scale. And I'm talking about the middle management, not the top management alone. So then once that happens, you see a basic pump in the market. Valuations get crazy, and founders also start demanding like 15 million valuation caps at a pre-seed round where they just have a deck and a team. And then usually the market deflates, as we've seen play out. Some of this is linked to interest rates in developed markets, because if it's a risk-on environment, people will come and invest in Pakistan. Right now, we're currently in a risk-neutral environment. So you're seeing Pakistan again kind of deflate a little bit in the tech scene. You're not seeing an announcement every day. But from a growth perspective, I mean, I'm personally aware already of about close to 7-8 growth funds. They're looking at Series B and Series C rounds in Pakistan. There's not too many Series C, but meaning they're building the funnel. So just like as most of the funds here, every single person that's investing, we do our research and we come up with a thesis and strategy before we go and invest. They're just looking, and they need to have a broad enough base. So for example, you want to have at least potentially 10 to 15 Series B and Series C deals before you start to look at Pakistan. And part of everything that all of us here have invested on last year is going to basically create that funnel in probably, I think you're going to see a couple of big Series B announcements in the coming 15, 20 days. One of them is one of my portfolio companies. So obviously I'm very privy to that. But it's going to keep happening. I mean, you're going to see now maybe pivot a little bit. You're going to maybe see a little bit more slowdown from institutional investors on the pre-seed rounds, and you might see more funnel coming in the seed, Series A, and Series B, and then eventually Series C and so on is going to play out as well. So think of it as like an evolution process, right? Just like you have to learn how to crawl, then walk, and then run. So the same thing happens to the ecosystem.
Faisal, I hope the company we're talking about is going to be a unicorn in the future.
Yeah, these guys are, I mean, it's amazing scaling. So it's
fantastic. Good to know. Sorry.
Right. So ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, in the interest of time, just last couple of minutes remaining, and I want to hear from all of you. So Misbah, your take on my question and the concluding remarks, please.
Sure. I think, Anza, look, there's like Faisal said, there's a trajectory here. There's also a timeline, right? So I think if you look at the way the markets have been built, this cycle is going to happen, like Faisal said. I think most of us there's some of us that will stay early stage investors, and there's some that would prefer to become growth investors. But up to now, that growth investor opportunity just hasn't been there in Pakistan, right? So as those of us that have focused on investing in the last 2 years, these companies are going to start maturing. Growth investors will start having many more options for investing. So I think we will definitely start seeing more of that. The other thing that we're all doing is, highlighting the Pakistan opportunity to growth funds. Like Faisal said, we're also talking to quite a few who are interested in Pakistan, trying to see what the right time is. I think one thing that I do think there's an opportunity is to look at growth capital from within Pakistan as well. I think there are a number of opportunities to tap into local investors that might want to come in and look at growth capital. I think there's a learning aspect over here as well. People need to understand how the space works, how you go from early stage VC to growth stage to late stage and then PE eventually. I think the process of education and learning is also going to continue to happen, and we'll see more happening. I think the market is only going to grow, right? So to the point that Yusuf made earlier, it is about execution. So we have to help the companies that have raised right now to execute, focus, operate, build, so that growth capital can come. And I don't have any doubt that it will. I think it's just a matter of when and where it comes from and how long it takes because of all the work that we're doing now. And of course, the macroeconomic factors, as well as the opportunity that Pakistan presents. So I'm very bullish. There might be a little bit of a correction as we go through this year because things have become a little crazy really quickly. But I think the long-term view definitely is long and definitely positive in terms of growth financing coming in and the market continuing to grow.
Right. Mr. Yusuf Hussain.
Yeah, so I'd like to say that, to put things in scale, we raised $350 million last year. India raised $36 billion. So we are still like 100 times behind, where we should be about 10 times behind. So I think there's a good chance that we close that gap more quickly than maybe some other countries. I think Atif Awan did an analysis that 2 years ago, he said we are 7 years behind Indonesia, and a year later, we are 5 years behind Indonesia. So we covered like 2 years in 1 year. So, so hopefully that growth continues. Inshallah, it will. There is some froth. I think there is a bit of a hype and maybe overvaluation. I think Tiger Fund has put some term sheets. They have reduced valuations, which has impacted at least one Pakistani company that I know about. Other than that, long term, I think I would concur that long term, I think right now it's a positive view. And we also got to see that international VCs, whether it's Kleiner or 20 VC or whoever, Vostok Capital, when they invest in a company, they expect their valuation to increase and to get a good ROI, obviously. Now, as long as, again, it comes down to execution, as long as they're delivering, they're producing the results, I think the Kleiners will go out to the growth funds around the world and say, come in on our next stage, we're very excited. I think I don't even think we need to do that kind of a PR or outreach. If the company is doing well, they will, even if we can't, they will, get the next stage investors. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Yusuf. And Misbah, since Tiger Fund was mentioned, would you like to quickly comment before I let Roger close?
Well, I think Yusuf is talking about other companies that they might be looking at. But yes, we're very proud that Creditbook was the first investment that Tiger did in Pakistan. I think they are continuing to look at the market just like Sequoia is, and recent others are as well. And I think, it's okay. There'll be funds coming in with different perspectives. I think we are now on the radar for tier 1 VCs, and we'll continue to see that interest grow. I think a little bit of correction might not be a bad thing for the market, to be honest.
Sorry, I just wanted to say I was not talking about Creditbook. I was talking about things in the Tiger Fund funnel, not
right.
Yeah, I understood that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Roger,
thank you so much.
And we'll be taking the closing remarks.
Yeah, look, I'll be honest with you. Growth is the next stage. I was speaking to Riyad Abu Jadeh of MEPP yesterday, And he said, I've offered term sheets to a few Pakistani startups, but they haven't taken it. So they're now looking at, they become more savvy from their perspective. Look, I'll be honest, I completely support all the panelists, what they've said. And the fact is that, when you have Silicon Valley VCs, Kleiner Perkins, Mamoon Hamid coming in and investing in Pakistan, that's just this growth. You've got Process coming in, investing in Bicare and various other, that's 100 billion, I don't know what amount of that money, it's $100 billion fund. It's fantastic, right? And it's all about growth now. And, completely endorse what Faisal said earlier, that now's the time to sort of really capture that growth market, right? And leverage off that. Because if you continue to stay as a seed, pre-seed, pre-series, then you're not going to get anywhere. You've got to get out there, and I think the founders are ready for that. And I hope whatever goes through, or the pipeline, or at least some of the ventures that are in the pipeline, that will be sort of out there. I think that's going to make a big difference, inshallah, for that perspective. So, I am really optimistic about the Pakistan startup, ecosystem. I think it's going to, you're right, there is a correction. Faisal said it was a hockey stick growth last year. And today we're looking at a slight correction, but that's good. It's good for the market. Every market goes through that. And I think that's going to be the sort of, the really defining factor to scaling these ventures, into Series A, Series B, and Series C and D, as mentioned. So I'm hoping that really happens. I'm completely supportive of the Pakistan startup ecosystem and all the venture capitalists out there, and of course the startups, and of course the legal entities that have made a big difference. And of course the regulators, adopting those best practices. And you see a lot of legal firms now getting into tech ventures. Previously, they were just traditional sort of opinions and guidances and so on and so forth. And now they're getting into tech because they've understood that this is going to be the next frontier, inshallah, in Pakistan.
Inshallah, and thank you for those very positive and pragmatic comments. Ladies and gentlemen, that will be all for today's session. I'm very thankful to all our esteemed panelists for joining us, for contributing to the knowledge economy. At least my morning became better. I couldn't have expected day 3 to go any more enthralling than this experience. Thank you very much. Please keep enlightening us with your thoughts and comments and feedback.
Keep inviting us and we'll give you all of that.
I will. I'll make sure. I'll make a note out of it. And thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. Please stay tuned. We've got a lot more planned for the day ahead for the FinCom Summit 2022 by CXO Global Forum. Next up, we've got a very interesting panel discussion on e-commerce, a catalyst for disruptive fintech innovation in Pakistan. So stay tuned and keep watching. This will be
absolutely. Thank you, Anza, for CXO Global Forum having this. I think it's a very unique opportunity, and there's a lot of very insightful information that has gone out from the panelists, especially Yusuf, Misbah, and Faisal, to budding entrepreneurs, that there is hope, there is belief, and there's opportunity. And I think that's something that resonates globally from Pakistan's perspective. So inshallah,
thank you very much.
Looking for that continuation in the future, inshallah.